Hi again. I feel the need to start talking about case and case marking because I have already more than once mentioned the split ergativity of Pama-Nyungan languages. Perhaps I should start with the verbs, because the verb is the nucleus of the clause, of most clauses in all languages, and that is where the action is, quite literally. But I feel that will have to become a long series about verbs in Pama-Nyungan languages, because first of all, different types of verb constructions have developed in different parts of Australia, and it is obvious that they have spread in areas where people have been in touch with each other. Secondly, the type of verb construction that is used in the north of Australia and in the northwest probably will seem quite alien to speakers of European languages. Not necessarily to speakers of Hindi or other Indo-Aryan languages of the Indian subcontinent, but most likely to speakers of European languages. Yes, so I thought I'd start with case marking. And it so happens that it was the very complex case marking patterns of the languages of Northwest and Western Australia that got me interested in the languages of that area to start with. But I actually haven't got around to analyzing these complex patterns in Ngara. Instead, I have spent quite a lot of time on verbs and on basic case marking. Hopefully I will get around to that at some point. So this video here today is case 101. So let's start with a transitive sentence. Let's say someone says this. This is a transitive sentence because it has a subject, that is the one the clause is about, hence the term the subject. It includes a verb that describes what is happening, and it includes an object, a direct object we call this one, which the object is usually affected somehow by what the subject is doing. So let's say someone says this. The people who are listening need to be able to interpret and understand who is the subject and who is the object. So in this case, who is doing the chasing? Because the cat could chase the dog just as well as the dog can chase the cat, right? So in order for people to understand, there are three main strategies used in the languages around the world. Some languages only make use of one of these, other languages of two, some languages of all three. Here in Western Europe, where case marking has largely disappeared in many languages, this is the main strategy. English has a very fixed word order. The subject comes before the verb, always. And in a transitive clause, the object comes after the verb. This, as it so happens, is the second most common word order found in languages around the world in transitive clauses in no less than 40% of all languages. The only other word order that is more common is this one, illustrated by this Turkish example at the bottom, which I will get back to. So here we have subject, and then object, and then verb in 45% of all languages. The second strategy is person marking on verbs. And in more conservative Indo-European languages, the person of the subject is marked on verbs. So here we have a Spanish example. I speak, you speak, he, she, it speaks. This is very common, to mark the person of the subject on the verb. Also common is to mark the person of the subject and the person of the direct object, like in this Nyangomarda example, which I have shown before. Let's go through this again. Yiri, see, the verb see. Ni, the first ni, marks non-future tense. The second ni is not a tense marker. It marks first person singular subject, and ndi marks second person singular object. So I see you. Yes, and the third strategy is case. Case is usually marked by endings, as in this case, pun intended. What we have here is that we have kiz. I'm not sure if that's how it's supposed to be pronounced, but let's say it is. So girl, adamlari, man, plural, and object marker. And gordo, sees. So the girl sees the men. Usually case is marked by endings. It is less common to do it the way they do in German, where they change the articles to indicate case. Like here, Mann and Hund, dog, they are both masculine nouns. So in the subject position, they both get the article der. But here, Hund gets the other article den to indicate that it is in fact the object. So this means that the man sees the dog. So now there have been changes on the board. There is another transitive clause here and an intransitive one. Important to note is that in transitive clauses, both the subject and the direct object are necessary for the clause to be understandable. If someone says Carl kicks, people want to know, what does he kick? In an intransitive clause, only the subject is necessary. However, this type of subject here, the one in the transitive clause, and this one, is not necessarily the same type of entity. You see, in transitive clauses, the subject is usually acting, and this action is affecting, influencing the direct object in some way. Like here, where the fact that Carl kicks the ball means that it changes location. In intransitive clauses, the subject is usually not acting or active in the same way. So we have Carl sleeps. This is not something that Carl does actively. He relaxes, he falls asleep, and then he continues to sleep until he wakes up again, for whatever reason. So that is the reason for why we have an A here. The subject of the transitive clause is often called agent, so A for agent, while we have the S for subject here in the intransitive clause. And now that we've come this far, we can look at the common case marking patterns found in the languages of the world. This one, called the nominative-accusative one, is the most common one. It is found in Indo-European languages here in Europe that haven't lost their case marking system. Languages such as German, Icelandic and Faroese. This, the ergative-absolutive system, is the second most common one. Ergative-absolutive languages are spread out in different places across the world. There is one such language in Western Europe. That would be Basque, the language isolate spoken down in the border region between Spain and France. But the largest concentration of ergative-absolutive languages in the world is found in Australia and in New Guinea, above Australia. In these two case systems, there is usually also a dative case, which is used for indirect objects. This is the direct object. It is influenced or affected directly by the action described by the verb. The indirect object is affected more indirectly. So we can take a sentence like, Carl gives grandma the pot. Carl is the subject and the agent. The pot is affected directly because it changes owners. And grandma is the indirect object because grandma is affected more indirectly by the action described by the verb. So there is usually a dative case for indirect objects. Our neighboring language here in Scandinavia, Finnish, is unusual in this respect. They lack a dative case. They have postposition phrases instead. And I won't go into that because that is quite complicated. And this case marking pattern is quite rare if we look out over the world. So in these two case marking patterns, there is one constituent in the transitive clause that is unmarked, that doesn't have a case marker. We saw in the Turkish example that adamları had a direct object marker that singled it out as the object, while kız did not have a case marker. And this is nominative-accusative case marking. Here, these two constituents are treated in the same way, which means that they are usually unmarked. For case, they take no case ending. This one is singled out. This one is the one that takes the case ending in the transitive clause. In the ergative-absolutive case marking pattern, it is in fact the agent that is singled out. The agent takes a case ending called the ergative case. These two are treated the same way, which means that they don't take any case ending. So then here it is the direct object that is unmarked for case in a transitive clause. Here in this system, all three of these take different case endings. So there is one for the transitive subject, another one for the transitive object, and a third one for the intransitive subject. So now that we've come this far, we can start to talk about case marking in Pama-Nyungan languages. And you see, all three of these case marking patterns are relevant because in Pama-Nyungan languages, pronouns usually take nominative-accusative case marking. Common nouns and names take ergative-absolutive case marking. And there is usually also a subclass of nouns or pronouns that take tripartite marking. So now we can start to look at what this actually looks like in Pama-Nyungan languages. But that will be in the next video, so that will be later.